On today's episode of Dance Med Spotlight, I'm speaking with Sarah Tyndall. She is a physical therapist and former dancer, owner of Restore Reform Physical Therapy in North Carolina. We talk a lot about a topic that hasn't particularly come up in previous episodes, foot health. So, talking about some of the structure and function of the foot, things that we can do to support the health of the foot and therefore support the dancer overall is a big area that we talk about. We also discuss how we are training for resilience versus just out of convenience as dancers, and some of the things that we can do to support dancers, dance teachers, studio owners, and more. To learn more about all of these different topics, make sure to check out the rest of the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Dance Med Spotlight, where we talk about all things dance medicine and dance science. Today, I am excited to be speaking with Sarah Tyndall. Welcome. So my very first question for everybody is, give us a little background of who you are and what got you to this point of specializing in working with dancers.
So I think probably like 99% of your guests, I danced growing up. It all started when I was in daycare. I was like 2 or 3 years old, and this little girl was waiting for the bathroom. This little girl comes out in her all pink outfit. It was her pink leotard and her pink skirt and her pink tights and her pink shoes. And of course, at 3, pink is my favorite color. I'm like, Mommy, she's in all pink. I want to dress like that. My mom's like, well, she goes to ballet class. And I was like, okay. And so that next year I got enrolled in, toddler ballet class, and first tutu, all pink, of course, pink sparkles. And I was pretty much addicted from there. The first year our local pre-professional company was in place, I was too young for it. So my mom didn't tell me about it until she took me to see the Nutcracker. And of course, fell in love with that. And I said, Mommy, I want to be Clara. She said, okay, well, next year you can audition and we'll see. I mean, you're pretty young. You're going to have to work hard for that. I said, okay. My first year in the company, I'm 8 turning 9, and I was Baby Mouse and a little pillow carrier for Clara's tiara in the second act. And, hands up every minute. Baby Mouse was this full-on acting role. I get shot. I carry the sword off, sobbing when Mouse King dies. But I worked my way up through the ranks, and I worked my way up through dancing, and eventually 8th grade, I got to dance Clara. And I looked at my mom, and I was like, Mom, I want Snow Queen. She said, okay, you know what you have to do. And so I kept working and kept working. And senior year, I got Snow Queen. But the week before, I sustained a grade 3 ankle sprain. And it turns out it was only about 4 months after another grade 3 ankle sprain that I had gotten that summer that I hadn't rehabbed. Mm-hmm. So I danced it anyway.
Of course. That's what we
do. Of course. It's my senior year. I don't know if I'm ever outside of spring production. I don't know if I'm going to be on stage again. I don't know if I'm doing Nutcracker again. At that point in time, I was dancing not only with our local company, but with guest dancing with a second company who was much earlier in the ranks. And so in 2 weeks after an ankle sprain with no rehab, I had 4 multi-hour staging practices and 9 productions of the Nutcracker with about 20 some different roles in total between the 9 shows. I was famous for my quick changes. I had one Nutcracker that I did 12 different costume appearances in a single Nutcracker. Don't ask me how that was possible. I really don't know. But the point is, I was there, and I had a few injuries along the way. I had a dislocated kneecap. I had multiple ankle sprains. I had a back strain, right? All common things we've seen in the dance world. Yeah. And the few times I went to PT, it was honestly pretty crappy. The first back PT, she actually did ultrasound across my spine, which as number one, we all know now, ultrasound really doesn't have a whole lot of value in clinic other than maybe some feel goods. But also going across the spine, not really a recommended treatment protocol. But that was it. It was all passive. There was no activity. There was nothing actually to get me back to dance. And I was like, Mom, I'm not going back after like 3 sessions. Tried a new place when I dislocated my kneecap. The guy ran me through a whole series of things. He put me on the leg press my first day, and that's 30 pounds. And now, mind you, I'm small. I'm like 85 pounds. I'm skinny. And I'm pressing at 30 pounds. I was like, am I supposed to feel something? It's like, well, you're not supposed to have pain. I'm like, yeah, but I don't feel anything. He's like, what, you don't feel any resistance? I'm like, no. So he
Yeah.
takes it to 40, I keep going, 50, I keep going, 60, I keep going, 70, 80, finally at 90 pounds. Meanwhile, I've been doing repetitions this whole time.
Hmm.
Finally at 90 pounds, I felt resistant. I felt I actually had to work a little bit. And he was just looked at me. He's like, I don't understand. And I'm like, do you know what I do every day? He's like, well, you dance. And I was like, do you know what that involves? He's like, well, you like stand at a bar, right? And I'm like, no.
Hmm.
So I finished out that session and I went back to two more, and it was literally the same exact exercises I did day one. No advancement, no progression, no change, no nothing. And I was like, Mom, I'm done. I'm like, I'll rehab in dance class. And that's what I did.
Hmm.
So all of that kind of fast forward into there has to be more, there has to be better. And that's really what, when I didn't end up getting into a company my senior year, which I'm okay with, that's what led me to, okay, then I go to school and I figure out how to help other dancers keep doing this, but better than the help that I had.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's sort of the, I don't know, I keep going back to the idea of, like, the villain origin story for a lot of us who end up working with
Yep.
dancers in some specialized way, is that maybe we encountered somebody where it wasn't a good experience, or, like, for me, I was an injured dancer in high school who just got bad advice and wish that I had known even a fraction of the things that I've learned along the way. So yeah, I think that is unfortunately common, and hopefully with folks like us who are doing this and becoming specialized in working with dancers, that will start to change as the generations go on.
And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see some of these newer clinicians coming out, whether it be it PTs, athletic trainers, or physicians. We're starting to see ones that have been affected by having a dance medicine provider
Yeah.
and being inspired by them rather than being frustrated. And I think that's such a better way to end up in the field, is through inspiration rather than, well, fine, I'll do this myself. Um,
Hmm.
which that is a dancer attitude though.
Exactly. That is very true. So I know one of the areas that you get really passionate about in the work that you do is specifically focusing on the feet. Tell me a little bit about, like, I guess, first of all, why did that become an area that you became fascinated with? Because I know their PTs were like, if I never touch a foot, I will be happy.
So I think it was meant to be. I remember in PT school, I was fascinated by foot. It intrigued me. And I think being a dancer, again, trying to like understanding the importance of articulation through demi into point. I trained, though I was in a small town, I had a very, very strict Russian Vaganova teacher. I mean, she trained at St. Petersburg. She was 77 all 9 years I danced with her, so nobody knows how old she was at the time. We just always said 77. That was it. We just left
Mhm,
it there. Um, so I think learning so much detail about the articulation and the proper technique and proper form, I was fascinated. And then we go into anatomy and we start talking about all these muscles, and my toes could do things. And all my classmates are like, what? How are you able to
mhm,
do that? So it kind of started there. And then fast forward, graduated. I got my first job actually in a hospital and did acute care for a while. My final rotation was acute care, and I realized there was so much value in understanding like the kind of the low points that the person can get to,
yes.
seeing some of the more involved cases. And while that hospital and that job weren't a good fit for me, I incredibly value that time there because of the perspective it gave me and what it taught me. But as I
Mhm,
left that position, I happened to find one where I got to work side by side with the resident PT for Pennsylvania Ballet, now Philadelphia Ballet.
mhm,
She was part time with them backstage and then part time in clinic, basically. And when she went out on maternity leave, I covered her full in clinic caseload. And I'm not going to lie, that year they dropped like flies. They just dropped like flies. Cam boots aplenty, like everywhere.
mhm,
Um, and then on and off through the years, just seeing whatever overflow or some of the younger dancers just kind of being available. But that clinic was located attached to Pennsylvania's foot and ankle practice, which at the time
mm,
Keith Wapner was the head of, Wen Chow, who had been at Hospital for Special Surgery, and she was our dance foot and ankle orthopedist. So I was literally on site with these amazing foot and ankle docs. I can look over their shoulder when they're looking at imaging, reviewing with the residents and being like, hey, what are you seeing? What's that going on? Or if I had a case that I shared with them, I could just walk over and talk to them. And so then I'm around it every day. So you add to it, dancers have what on average 50 to 65% of dance injuries are foot and ankle related.
Mhm.
There's, a huge percentage of dance that involves foot and ankle. And then you add to being on a foot and ankle clinic, and it just kind of it expanded for me. And then I went to the military PT side of things for a while after I left corporate. And again, you see weird injuries there, but I kind of became everybody's go-to when they had a complicated foot and ankle case. They're like, hey, Sarah, can I run this by you? Do you mind seeing this soldier for me? Do you have time to take a look? Um, and as I kept kind of diving down that chain and then starting to branch out on my own, I investigated even further, and I have definitely not lost everything from what I did 10 years ago, but I have continued to evolve and shift everything I do. And I'm so much more passionate about people being able to understand their feet as actually having everything you need to be your structural foundation. We
Mhm.
don't need support and cushion and all this other stuff. I mean, look at most dancers. We dance in nothing. I mean, a good point shoe doesn't hold you up. It just gives you structure for position. You hold yourself up in the point shoe, right?
Mhm.
But how many dancers never even put on point shoes
Yeah.
nowadays, especially with all the different styles we have? So yes, feet, I mean, it's kind of a long story into it, but that it's been a whole 20-year plus journey of my practice. And so Archie is here
Mhm.
for some appearances as we start talking about some of this. But
Lovely.
that's how I got to loving feet.
Well, and I think one of the things that I didn't appreciate until I was in PT school is just how complicated the foot and ankle are. So many joints and layers of muscles, and we have muscles that live just within the foot itself, and
Yep.
then the muscles that I think people commonly think of in our calf and all of that kind of stuff, thinking of like the gastrocnemius and soleus muscles that make up our calf. And so just appreciating that each of those areas and each of those joints kind of serve their own purpose that we need to
Hmm.
maximize for dancers, especially if they're dancing on point and doing things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things that I always think about for dancers, especially when it comes to the foot and ankle, is working through some of that complexity and even like where is their weight on their foot as they're just standing, even not even having to do anything fancy. I find a lot of times dancers have a tendency, especially younger dancers as they're figuring out technique and all of that sort of thing, tend to really want to stay off their heels and get really grippy with their toes. What's something that maybe you see or something that you consider when we're seeing things like that?
I would say that absolutely, you're going to see those things. And I think it comes from a lot of different things, not just because they're dancing, because I do see foot and ankle outside of the world of dancers, and I see a lot of similarities even in my non-dancers. So I
Mhm.
think it comes from a lot of things. When we talk about the anatomy and the complexity of the foot, right? I always teach patients from day one your tripod.
Yep.
When we look at basic structures, when we go through basic geometry, basic structures, your triangle is your most stable, simple structure.
Mhm.
An arch is your most dynamically stable structure. There's a reason the foot is a triangle connected by three arches. Like it's not, I don't know. I don't think that that just happened. I think that there's a reason for it. So, of course, your tripod is going to be the center of your calcaneus or your heel bone, that ball of your big toe, centered preferably between your sesamoids, not more on one than the other, and then the
Mhm.
ball of the little toe, creating that. We then have the lateral arch, which is pretty flat for most people, but still exists. The medial arch, which is the one everybody talks about and is always worried about, and then underneath the transverse arch, which domes, which I always tell people make a fist, that dome there. When you curl your toes down, you should have a dome there as well. And one of the things that's causing that to be lost in, I think everybody, but dancers too, is going to be our shoes. For the longest time, kids didn't wear shoes until maybe they went to school. And then this thing came around sometime mid-century of babies' first shoes and putting the tiniest baby in these like rigid, stiff, super cute shoes. And then your parents bronzed them to keep forever. I actually have my dad's bronze shoes, so I know that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, in the 80s, we started having the cute little Mary Janes for girls and all this stuff. But we're taking a super, super flexible, adaptable foot. The bones that a baby's born with are only shells of what the bones will become, right? So
Mm-hmm.
bunions aren't congenital. Like, I'm going to burst everybody's bubble right there. The bone structure of a baby cannot be born with a bunion unless there is something neurologic going on. That is the kind of the only outset. Um, Bunions aren't congenital, you develop them, but they can be developed at a young age because of shoes. So
Mm-hmm.
most modern shoes, thanks to the Industrial Revolution, are mimicking what centuries ago were the elite and upper class shoes. They are narrow, they are heeled, they are rigid, they have this kind of status to them. But the reality is we need our feet. The elites got to be carried everywhere and carted everywhere.
Right.
We need our feet. So when we look at a modern shoe, now this is an On Cloud, a super popular shoe. Sorry, On, but I'm gonna go ahead and trash you right now because this is the shoe that I have to trash you. This was the last regular shoe that I bought. And I almost bought the Topos, but I bought these instead. And then I went back 3 months later and got the Topos and never looked back.
Mm-hmm.
This On Cloud is one of their smallest drops. It's an 8 to 10 millimeter drop. To put in reference, a 25.4 millimeters is an inch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a lot of shoes, when you talk Brooks, Asics, and a lot of your traditional sneakers, then have a 12 to 13 millimeter drop, which is a half-inch heel to toe difference. So it's like walking around in a half-inch heel all day long. What is that doing? It's loading our forefoot. It's loading us here all day long. Then add to dancers the fact that we spend so much time up in releve, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
also training to load our forefoot here. But then we go and we leave the studio, we shove our feet in this. And the thing is, it's not just your sneakers, it's the slides, it's the flip flops, it's the sandals. It's literally every shoe out there has this heel to toe drop. Over time, it shortens the Achilles, making it harder to get a full plie, making it harder to get that tibia to go forward. And so I think that that starts to shift our mechanics. The other thing with traditional shoes is going to be the shape. It's that
Mm-hmm.
toe box, right? They all come to a point. Sometimes the sole will fool you a little bit. And most of the time people will be like, oh, I have plenty of room for my toes because they put mesh here. And yeah, I can wiggle my toes just fine. When you pull out the insole, so here's the insole of an On. And then here is the insole of one of my favorites currently, which is Lono Barefoot Wear. Which
Mm-hmm.
one looks like a foot
Mm-hmm.
and which one looks like a cone? I tell people, like, go join Buddy up in the North Pole if you want to wear these.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but then now let's extrapolate that to dance shoes. And unfortunately, my ballet flats are at my clinic, so I can't pull those out. But every ballet flat on the market right now that I know of is ambidextrous, just like a sock. It's
Mm-hmm.
left, right. We wear our lefts and rights into it. So what does that do? That pulls that big toe in. As soon as we pull that big toe in, we destabilize the entire midfoot. We
Mm-hmm.
lose the ability to control everything here. So when we talk about dancers rolling on their arches, well, if we can't use our big toe, we're going to roll down.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have that. And that's without talking about forcing turnout and some of the other reasons that it can happen, right? That's just what's happening from the shoes. And I do think that this is a call to action. We're seeing so many styles of everyday shoes coming out that have a natural toe box. I really feel like there is an angle, and I would love to work with a dance brand who wants to do this. Let's get some healthy ballet flats on the market. Let's get some
Mm-hmm.
anatomical left and right ballet flats on the market, not with extra cushion, not with all this extra, but just a toe box that allows this big toe to do what it needs to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, even talking about like with point shoes and that sort of thing, now we have so many more options than I remember having as a kid
Oh my gosh,
of
yes.
the different components and how it's shaped and how the different pieces come together and all these different things. And so being able to work with a skilled fitter to make sure that
Yes.
you are supported in the shoe, not getting crammed into any one position, that we're not sort of just pressing someone into some of that kind of bunion territory, and using a lot of other things at our disposal, like toe spacers. Those weren't a thing
Yes.
when I was growing up.
No.
And so, there's so many ways that we can now try to make modifications where even though the point shoe from an anatomical standpoint is far from ideal, we can make it as supportive as possible for what it is.
Well, and it's funny. So I got these gainers. I still need to sew them. Please don't judge me. But I keep these and a pair of blocks, both of which I was fit into, right, in
Mhm,
my office to show some differences. Um, the blocks were fit in a more traditional manner based on the shape of my foot. I have a tapered foot, therefore they put me in a more tapered shoe.
mhm,
Ironically, this 4 box, which is almost the lightest that Gainer has, the 5 is what I wanted, but it was an extra weight. And the amount that I'm using them, it doesn't matter as much. So again, dosage. So if you're only wearing point shoes for an hour versus if you're wearing point shoes for 30 hours, that is a very big difference in dosage of the week.
mhm.
But this 4 box, ironically, is what I wore back in high school, back in the 90s when gainers were, really kind of first gaining any level of popularity. You
Yep.
traced your feet, you sent them a picture of your side tendu, your second position tendu left, second position tendu right. You mailed that off and they mailed you back point shoes. And I'm not going to lie, those were the best fitting point shoes I ever danced in.
Mhm,
The squareness of the box. The other best pair that I danced in was Sancha, which
mhm.
again made a more square box.
Yep.
Everything else that I was fit into was tapered, tapered, tapered. And thankfully, I had strong feet and I don't really need a lot in the shank. I don't have a super flexible foot, but I have a very strong foot. I could work on soft shanks. And
Mhm,
really, it was more the box shape that was an issue. But I would always crush my boxes in the
mhm.
tapered shoes because my big toe was being driven in and then I was driving down, right? So I'm being compressed in, and then I've got a long big toe. So that long big toe is just driving down into the center of the box and just crushing the tips of the boxes.
Yep.
So looking back at it, I wish I'd stayed with gainers. And for me, they're the best. The other thing that I will say that I do like about them and that you can get with Freeds, you can get with some other brands as you get into a higher level of dancing, if you're willing to pay for it, is the customization. There are
Mhm,
9 points that you can customize on a gainer, all under the same price point. That's pretty impressive. And I have to say that that's pretty nice. Now, this is not the shoe for everybody. I am not saying everybody needs to go out and get gainers today. I'm saying for me, I find that beneficial. The reality is a good fitter is going to recognize that even if they don't carry the shoe you need, they're going to say, this is the best that I have for you, but this brand makes this model shoe that I don't carry that might be a little bit better, and here's why.
mhm,
They're gonna tell you that to give you that best fit. But really, I don't want to see any dancer in a tapered point shoe. I think tapered point shoes really they need to go. Semi-tapered, there can be some play for. I really want everybody in as square of a box as you can that you don't sink into.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
that comes into having strength, that comes into, like you said, maybe using a toe spacer or a little bit of wool padding or something to help accommodate. But yeah, that's where I'm like, I want as square as we can get you without sinking.
Mhm. Yeah, we wanna support the anatomy that we have
Right.
and have good strength in all of those other pieces to find the balance between all of it. I wanna switch gears a bit and talk a little bit about, I think this goes nicely into how we are maybe training as dancers and this idea of, like, training for resilience, training to support us in what we're doing versus, as you kind of mentioned in our little intake form for this, convenience adaptations. Tell me more about this idea.
So I think I look at this as a whole lifestyle. And I think that this is a cultural lifestyle, not just in the US, I think, worldwide, because of internet, because of cell phones, because of social media. Everything is on the go, on the fly. We're busier than ever.
Yeah.
Dancers are way busier now than they ever were when we were kids. Even though I had a company and I was a full-time regular student and I danced at a studio and a company, they're still busier now. And I
Mhm.
just don't understand it. But I think it comes from this fact that because we can do everything on the go, we don't need that downtime that we used to have. We're not taking that family time. We're not taking that time. So it's a really lifestyle. When it comes to dance related, you got to do the hard stuff. You can't just stretch. That's not going to improve your extensions. That's not going to, yeah, you can do this wow fancy stretch from TikTok. Great. What did
Mhm.
that gain you? Yeah, you can learn this fancy trick, but do you actually have the technique for it? Do you actually have the strength for it? Do you actually have the foundation for it? And then the other thing is going to sometimes come to parents and saying, yeah, I can put my kid in all these classes, but I'm not going to.
Mhm.
And here's why.
Mhm.
I have a 13-year-old. They don't need to be dancing 20 hours a week. They need to
Yeah.
be dancing 10 to 13 hours, but that also needs to include them going to the gym to work other muscles that they don't normally work, or playing,
Mhm.
some other sport, playing in the backyard with their siblings or their friends,
Yes.
you know? So I think it's training for resilience to me is about training your entire body to handle the load that you need. It is not necessarily doing more dance. It is not necessarily most dancers don't actually need more mobility. Maybe a few
Mhm.
key areas. You might have a tight ankle that needs some mobility. You might have a
Yeah.
tight mid back, but your whole body probably doesn't need more mobility,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Mobility is not going to build resilience. It's probably going to actually make you more fragile. It might actually make you weaker and more susceptible to getting injured. So instead, let's train the strength around those joints. Let's train that. So it's choosing to do the hard work, choosing to do the hard things to build your body's ability to withstand what you want to do and what your goals are. Not doing the easy things, not always picking that on the go. But
Mhm.
convenience and resilience to me is just this huge lifestyle that I think we have everything's take a pill. Oh, well, can I just take ibuprofen and just go dance? No, no, that's not. If you
Mhm.
have a performance today that there's no choice, fine, one time, but not every day,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
it's kind of a complicated answer, I feel like, because it encompasses so much more than just one aspect of dance. It really encompasses like looking at how you live your life.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is such an important point to think about because there there are so many times where I see dancers coming in where, whether it is getting some additional sessions in physical therapy to work on some stuff, whether it is following up on a referral to a dietitian to make sure that they are
Mhm.
fueling themselves well, modifying a dance schedule in order to support them in a healthy way
Yes.
and not just the expectation of the studio owner or
Yep.
kind of that comparison of, well, so and so is dancing 30 hours a week and they're doing really well. That must be what I need to do. And so
Yes.
it's really hard when you're seeing all of these other things or you're having all of these other challenges coming up to make some of those decisions to do the hard things, even when we know that it can be really beneficial to do those hard things.
Well, and like you said, it's diet, it's training schedule, it's rest, it's choosing to put the phone away more than an hour before bedtime. Or if
Mhm.
you're going to be on it, wear blue light blocking glasses. You can get stuff for, $30 now that will help to block that light. If you are going to have to be on it, maybe you have a digital platform for school and you have to do homework or something. But it's making those choices. It's the diet instead of like, oh, we'll just pick up fast food on the go on the way to the studio. That's not fuel for your body. In fact, there's a lot coming out right now about how most of that food probably contains more harmful ingredients than it does good ingredients at this point in time. Like we're understanding so much more about the additives that they put into these foods to make them taste
Mhm.
good, to make us want them. But again, that's that convenience. We'll just drive by and pick up some food and eat in the car on the way to dance rather than, hey, maybe adding this extra dance class is too much because we don't have time to get you dinner before
Mhm.
or afterwards appropriately. You can't go straight from school to dance at 4 o'clock and be there till 9 o'clock. And
Mhm.
then you have to do homework. We have to eat somewhere along the way. And that's one of the things that I'm seeing. I'm seeing dancers that have a single day in their weekday schedule where they're literally starting at 4 and going until about 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, okay, where's dinner? Where's homework? Where's decompression time? That's
Mhm.
way too much, especially when you start talking about the fact that some of these dancers are 10 years old and they're
Yeah.
going for 4 and 5 hours on a single day. That's
Mhm.
way too much load, way, way too much
Mhm.
load. So if you are going to try to do that, your body has to be that much stronger. And strength comes from fuel, recovery, training, like all of those things.
Mhm. Yeah, it's about finding that balance between all of it, and I think I mean, to something that you said earlier, I when I was growing up, I remember dancers danced a lot of hours, but I don't think it's at the same volume that they
No.
are now, and, you know, having kind of the culture of take more private lessons, do more workshops, and the way some of the competitions and conventions and things work with
Yes.
workshops and stuff there, and oh my goodness, it's just it's a lot on
And
these young
competitions
bodies.
weren't in the 90s, competitions weren't a thing. There weren't dance competitions. That has all arisen thanks to, and don't get me wrong, So You Think You Can Dance and some of these other shows have brought amazing light to the strength and the artistry of dancers and
Mhm,
really started to show the world so much more than this dainty little ballerina on their toes, right? That is
yeah,
wonderful. But it's also created this competition mindset and this advanced performance mindset where I think we're pushing young bodies too far too fast. We're not focusing on technique, we're pushing them
mhm,
too many hours at a time. Yes, when I was a senior company member in high school, we had company class at noon on Saturdays and Sundays, followed by rehearsal. The rehearsal always started with the portions that had the youngest kids first, so that they could get out of the studio and be done. And the end of the day was snow and flurs and the big stuff, right?
mhm,
That when it was all left to just basically the senior dancers or whatever part of the production and for spring show that was core. And so I might be there coming up on performance. It might start with being there for 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday and Sunday, up to being there to 6 to 8 hours on a Saturday or Sunday.
mhm,
But I also wasn't dancing that whole, well, I wasn't technically dancing that entire 6 to 8 hours. I oftentimes danced in the wings. I
mhm,
learned every piece of choreography in every show, and it paid off more than once when there were last minute injuries. And I was able to just step right into a role that I'd never technically rehearsed.
mhm,
But I was marking, right? I wasn't full out dancing. I was marking, much lower intensity. And there were times that we laid our heads down on our dance bags and took a 20-minute nap, or we took a little walk, a block up the street to get snacks. We didn't know about what healthy snacks were. Don't judge us back then. It was a little convenience store. We got what we could. But
mhm,
we had breaks in that time. It wasn't 6 to 8 hours of dancing, but these young dancers now are doing class to class to class to class for 4 to 5 hours.
mhm,
We had class for an hour and a half, again, as a junior, senior in high school. Ballet technique class was an hour and a half, 3 to 4 days a week, depending on how many you chose to take. If you chose to take tap and jazz, those were another half hour after that. So we're talking about a 2 hour window. Wednesdays, there was no additional class that would sometimes become extra company or rehearsal for senior dancers, but no more than an hour. So again, we're at a max of 2.5 hour window there. And
mhm.
that was at 15, 16, 17 years old.
Yep.
So yeah, there's just this whole thing in there. And I think dance studio owners, you need to really take a step back and look at your studio schedule. And I'd rather a dancer go more days for shorter windows than, oh, well, we'll just have everybody come one day, right?
Mhm,
And then we'll just smack everything into one day. Because I think it's just
mhm.
overload sometimes for these bodies.
Yes, definitely. And, one of the things that I've noticed too, because like one thing I make a point of is periodically going around to different dance studios, even to try out an adult class for myself, just to see what the studio's like, take a class, try something different. Um, but seeing the layout in some of these studios, where some you come in and it literally just goes into the studio spaces, there isn't space for dancers to have downtime, to
Yep.
eat a snack, to do a little homework if they had a break in class. And then there's others where they do have, maybe like a lounge space or they have microwaves and they have, things that at least encourage or support the idea of, if you have
Mhm.
downtime, there's space for you to use it effectively. And
Right.
so even the decision making of the layout of this space that you have as a studio owner can kind of help set the tone for what some of the
Mhm.
culture is going to be, in addition to how you approach scheduling dancers and all of that sort of thing.
And that's a great point, because that it literally, as you said that, I thought of two very different studios that I've been in. One that every studio had its own entrance, and part of it was the owner started in a small section of like a strip plaza. And
Yeah.
as she was able to grow and expand, she just a space, at least, another section cleared up. So she just moved into that and moved into that and ended up taking over the whole plaza, which is wonderful for her. But each
Mhm,
studio has its own unique entrance, and most of them have no real lobby. And if they did,
mhm.
it was like a closet. You could
Yeah.
barely shove back. I mean, bags would be all over the floor because there weren't even enough places to store bags. And versus another one that I've been to, that as she grew, she ended up taking over an old grocery store,
Oh,
or,
cool.
or a Walgreens or something. A
Mhm,
big retail store. Set up the studios, two bigger, a couple smaller studios, but the whole big section that's open, there's a few tables, there's a TV so that if parents want to watch their littles during class, they can. There's some tables and a sofa off to the side. There's an area to eat in the back. So, like
mhm,
when the dancers are there for summer intensive or a workshop during the school year, when there's a day off from school, they have a place to sit and eat lunch. They have downtime between classes. They can sit on the floor and do some band exercises or whatever they need to do. And you're absolutely right. That culture, it feels very different when you walk into them. And sometimes it's not by choice. It's just the circumstances you worked with and that
yep,
you have access to, and you've made it work. But how then can we generate that culture? Maybe we have to space out classes a little bit more and give more of a 15, 20-minute window in the classes, and have, mats or things that are available that if, kids need to eat, hey, just grab a yoga mat, sit on that. We'll clean that off when it's done. But like, can we create a culture for that downtime?
mhm. Yes. And I think some of these different concepts come into this idea even more of, kind of some of this modern studio, especially competition or vocational type places, versus maybe recommendations that we have from the medical side, from health and fitness side. I think a lot of the evolution in the dance community has come from that. It is an art form and it's an evolution of the art form, but there's so much that we could learn from our sports colleagues and medical colleagues to maybe change the way that we approach certain things and just have dancers be stronger, more resilient, healthier, happier, all the different things, with some differences of maybe how we've evolved so far.
Yeah, I think that it's just, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to, if you're a studio owner or even a teacher at a studio, and maybe you love the studio that you work with because you know it's just a great atmosphere, it's positive and uplifting. You love the classes that you teach and the students you have coming in, but maybe you're sitting here listening to this and you're realizing, we don't have a down space for our dancers. They're here for quite a while. They've got breaks. We don't have anywhere for them to make use of that break. And maybe this is then a conversation that either you as a studio owner have with your own teachers, or your teacher, one of your teachers, if you have a good rapport with the owner, you bring up and you just start discussing and say, well, hey, Sarah's one of our local PTs. Let's reach out to her and have her come in and see if she has any suggestions for how we can make this work.
Mhm.
Or, PTs, if you're doing workshops, maybe one of the workshops we can do this summer and summer intensives is how to use downtime effectively. Like, what's the benefit of downtime? And then that kind of creates a segue into that studio owner realizing, hey, I don't have this opportunity for my dancers, and it's something I can create or want to create. Um, yeah, it's funny. I used to, at one point in my career when I worked corporate, I was in Philly, and for a while I floated to fill in space at the one of the new clinics that had opened up on the Eagles training facility. So every day I was going into this gated facility with this whole giant space, and like the back of our PT, literally there was a door that led like into their training room. It
Mhm.
was kind of a one-way door though. We didn't go through it, but the players would sometimes come through to wander to see the docs or whatever. But we did get to go back there from time to time and like looking at how now again, obviously this is NFL. This is where money is not an issue. And unfortunately,
Mhm.
even in most of your biggest dance companies, money is still an issue.
Yep.
That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But looking at how they have things set up in the locker rooms and how everybody has their own space and there's plenty of room in the locker room for people to move around. They have the training room, they have a training room set up for strength-based work. They have a training room set up for cardio-based work. They have a training room set up for mobility-based work. So like they even have different spaces intended for different things. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, we're kind of missing some of that. Again, even on that dance world. I've been a backstage PT where I was in the Academy of Music in Philly. I was on like all the way, I had to climb the stairs all the way literally to the top like dome.
Mhm.
And they had a table and some foam rollers. And they're like, have fun.
Yep.
Like, okay. I showed up to another, I was doing a touring show and I picked it up last minute because they hadn't realized that the PT didn't have a license. The PT was licensed in Jersey and not in Philly.
Mhm.
And so I picked it up last minute and went down there and I had a folding picnic table. And that was all I was provided
Mhm.
in a closet of a room about maybe 8 by 12.
Yep.
And I had 4 hours of dancers to see before they went on stage that night that I'd never met, knew nothing about. So like you
Mhm.
make things work. We've all done it. If you've
Oh
done any
yeah.
backstage work, you get creative, you make it work, but it shouldn't have to be like this all the time.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and one of the things that I've seen come up too, there, in my area, there are at least a couple of studios that I'm aware of that have created some space or are talking about creating space to bring people in to provide services and to provide support, whether it is massage, physical therapy, any number of different things. One of the studios that I can think of, my friend actually is the PT who goes into that space, and they have a special room that is set up, and different providers come in different days of the week to
That's
provide
awesome.
support. There's another one that has been talking about bringing a PT in and having them almost basically run a clinic out of the studio. But then there's kind of the business perspective of that for the PT of, will people from other studios come and see them?
Right.
Or is it only the studio, if that is the only place that they are housed as the physical therapist? So, I mean, there's some different challenges, some different approaches to the way that some of these studios are talking about doing these things, but at least those conversations are happening. And at least
Yes.
those thoughts are coming up of like, okay, how can we support the dancers that we have to stay healthy?
Yeah. And I think in general, the dance world is working in that direction. I
Yeah.
mean, whether it's dance or gymnastics, like I see that movement in that direction, which is really positive, but it seems to be lagging behind the move to do more.
Hmm.
Like I'm seeing that move to do more and that push to do more faster, younger, sooner, more aggressively. And then behind that is coming in the like, how do we now take care of the health of our dancers? And it's probably because these studios are seeing people drop like flies from injuries and then running into issues for competitions or performances because of too many injuries. And so realizing
Hmm.
they want to do this, we have to do something on the back end or underneath it to create that support. Um, but yeah, I think I'm happy to hear that, and I would love to see a little bit more of that. I know that coming into the Cary area, I was very not well known in North Carolina. My only experience in North Carolina before opening my own practice was at Fort Bragg,
Hmm.
which is a little medical bubble there for military. And so it's been very hard for me to break into the dance world. The couple of conservatories in the area that are really good that do work closely with PTs, they already have a clinic, they already have an in, they already have their person they go to, and that's great. And then the rest are mostly smaller studios. And
Hmm.
that's where I'm seeing that there's a wide range of how things are set up. The conservatories definitely seem to have a little bit more of that, like, we know we need this to keep our dancers going. And that's great. The small studios, and again, budget,
Hmm.
finances, space, there's a lot of factors involved.
Yes, most definitely. And I think that's a good opportunity too of, even if you don't have the means to have some of these things in-house, making connections to people in the community
Yeah.
like yourself that you can go to, that you can refer to, that you can bring in for educational sessions, whatever the case may be. That's a really good opportunity to create that network of people to help provide that support so that you also, as a studio owner or as a dance teacher, don't feel like you have to be all the things to all the people and provide all of it
Definitely not.
somehow in house.
And I think that's so important because really, I mean, if you think about a performance is a team, and it's not just the dancers on stage and the choreographer. It's the people who do the lighting, the sets, the costuming, the costume changes, the prop management. If
Mhm.
anybody's ever going to go on stage and your prop that you need is not where it's supposed to be and you're frantically running around with 15 seconds before you have to like go, you know how important that prop management is. So that team extends so far beyond the performers.
Mhm.
And if we take that same stage approach of a team and we start looking at the health of your performers, it's a team. Like you said, it's do we have a dietitian? Do we have a physician that we can refer to? Do we have a mental health provider? Do we have some PTs or good chiros or whatever the case may be? Like, who do we have in our network? And it doesn't always have to be this one person. We might have our main go to, but what if they're really booked up? What if they're on maternity leave? What if a million other things have happened? Do I have an entire network? And that's where I challenge some of these places who have, and I will say I have been turned away at front desks. I've come in trying to just say, hey, I understand you have somebody. I just want you to know that I'm here as a backup. They're like, yeah, I don't know why you're here.
Mhm.
But literally the front desk will do that. And I'm like, okay, well, here are my cards. Have a nice day. Like it's just get turned away by the front desk. And I'm like, challenge your front desk to say, hey, thank you so much. We do have somebody we work with regularly, but I'll make sure the director knows that you're available. And maybe we can get you a touchdown to talk and we can just make you part of our network. And I'm
Mhm.
like, that's all I want is just be a part of your network. I don't care if I'm your backup. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Send me as your backup and give me that opportunity to still work with your dancers. But the bigger that network is, the more likely you are to really care for your performers.
Mhm. Yes. And having that set up before there's a problem. Like I've seen at
Yes,
studios where it seems like all of a sudden there's a rash of injuries. And if that is the time that you are starting to try to find some of those people in your network, it's going to be a lot more stressful
yeah,
than if you develop that over time and kind of have your list of folks
right.
for when you do need them.
And I'm totally, like I said, not every provider you work with, or, whether it's a healthcare or a dietitian or whatever it is, not every person is going to be your favorite, and not every person is
Right.
going to fit every one of your dancers. So there may be personalities that you can say, hey, this dancer really needs care, but I'm not sure that that personality is going to be a good fit, but I do think this person would be. And so that's also where that bigger network, you can look at individual personalities and actually fit your dancers to where things are going to go. Like he's not in here today. I did trap him out because notoriously he would want to leave in the middle of this. But my dog Levi, he's an older pup, but he's still super friendly and super high energy for his age. I don't know how he does it. But he comes to work with me most days. He hangs
Mhm.
out of my clinic. So that may not be for every person,
Mhm.
but I will tell you, he is an amazing therapy dog. Never trained in it. Honestly, I couldn't train him in anything if I tried. He's a few crayons short upstairs, but he knows when people are kind of like working really hard, and he'll just come over and give them a little nose and give them a little snuggle when they're on the reformer, and then go back and lie down.
Mhm. I
So
love
like maybe that type of vibe is the vibe that a dancer needs. Maybe they just need that extra little bit of feel goods. And so that's an opportunity you can send. You also may have a dancer is allergic to dogs and you're like, hey, I don't think you should go here. Like we love them, they're really good, but she keeps a dog in clinic and we don't
Mhm.
want your allergies to flare up. Totally fine. Like have that network for that multitude of reasons and issues.
Yeah, most
And
definitely.
not everybody's good at everything. I love feet. Like you said, there are PTs who are like, please don't make me touch a foot. Although if you're in the dance world and you don't touch feet, I kind of really question that.
Right?
But I love feet. Like it's
Mhm.
weird. My husband is weirded out by it. It's fine.
Mhm.
I get it. But maybe if you're having a rash of foot injuries, maybe you send to the provider who loves feet
Yes. Yes.
versus back injuries, you send to that provider who does, the pelvic stuff.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep, I am not your like, elbows are my least favorite thing. I can treat some elbows, but, I'd rather not. So,
Yeah,
send
from
them to the
here down,
people.
I become Talladega Nights. The whole I don't know what to do with my hands.
Mhm.
I've gotten better at it thanks to having a lot of OT friends, and I have an OT that's on board with me like one day a week in my clinic these days to help, say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and let you work with somebody who's a little bit more specialized than I am.
Yeah.
But I think that's, yeah, we have to recognize we're not good at everything.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be generalists. We're really not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most definitely. All right. Well, I think this is a good opportunity for a special segment on the show. On every episode of Dance Med Spotlight, we have the final bow. In other words, the take home message. We've talked about a lot of different things in this episode. So if people were to walk away with just one or two bits, what do you hope that they walk away with?
Get shoes that fit your feet, please. There are 5 things I look at for shoes, and I didn't really go over it, but I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick right now. Number one is the shape of the toe box, foot shaped. Yes, they kind of look like clown shoes in comparison to your dance shoes, but that's a good thing for your feet. Flat, so we don't need arch support, we don't need a toe spring, we don't need a heel drop. It's nice and flat, flexible enough that your feet can move naturally. Keep in mind all these joints and all this movement in here, we need it to be able to happen. Um, Foot shape, flat, flexible. Feel is going to be the thinness. You need to be able to feel the ground. I'm not saying you have to be completely barefoot. You can have a little cushion in there, but if you can't find your tripod, the center of the heel, ball of the big toe, ball of the little toe, then we've got too much cushion. The final one is going to get everybody, and that's fixed. Slides and flip-flops. If you're just running from the car to the studio, not a big deal. But if you're walking around, you're hanging out with your friends, whatever, please wear shoes that are fixed to your feet. If it's a sandal, just have an ankle strap so that you're not
Mhm.
clawing your toes to hold it on. So foot care goes beyond the studio, and a lot of it goes to what you do outside of the studio, what you do when you're not dancing. That can also be using toe spacers. I like this style to wear every day. This is the Gait Happens pair
Mhm.
that I have. Some people like this. This is Wild Toes by TSC. They're a little bit stretchier, but toe spacers are great. Toe socks are great. Just to give your feet that little bit of love, and then make sure your shoes fit properly. If you dance in points, especially, fit regularly and often. There's new shoes on the market literally every day, every month. There's new shoes coming out. Your foot changes, your needs change.
Mhm.
Refit. So foot health is really a very, very, very big aspect, and there's only so much time to talk about it.
Right? Yeah, that could be like 20 hours of content right there.
One of these days I'll get around to that. But then the other thing is going to be like your body is resilient. It can do a lot of things, but you have to train your body to be resilient. And resiliency doesn't just come from dancing more or doing stretching to the next fad that's on TikTok. It comes from an entire aspect of your lifestyle. Take time to have dinner and eat good meals. Make sure you're fueling your body. Protein, we didn't really bring that up, but protein, protein, protein. Yes, you need carbs. I'm not saying avoid carbs, but you cannot build strength. You cannot build muscle without protein. And I think that that's the
Mhm.
number one thing that most dancers are actually missing is enough protein. I start there and then I look at the rest of it after that.
Mhm.
Um, Fueling your body, getting enough rest, getting quality rest, having breaks in your dance schedule if you can coordinate them, and using those breaks appropriately so you actually get some recovery in your downtime and you're not just running yourself ragged. And then having a team of providers available to you for the things that you might need, whether that's through your studio or looking for them on your own, asking through Facebook and other mom groups, like ask around. We're out there. We're
Yes.
we're not, although I'm surprisingly hard to find because Google doesn't like me very much, but that's okay. I'm getting better at it. But we're out there. We're here for you.
Yes, 100%. The last thing is the shameless plug. So, this is your opportunity to plug anything that you have going on, any organization that you want to shout out. The floor is yours.
Okay, so obviously I am owner of Restore and Reform. I'm a small but mighty practice in Cary. So anybody who's listening who's from the Cary Raleigh area, please Google Restore and Reform. I just relaunched my whole website. I've been doing tons of upgrades. I'm literally a one-woman show. I am my own admin, my own website, my own social media. If you have hints on social media, I am open to suggestions. It's not my strength. But I'm here. If you have foot issues, please come see me. Dancers and feet are like my two favorite things. I work with a lot of people. I'll at least talk to and evaluate almost anybody who wants to see me. And then if I'm not the right fit, I'll try to help you get there as
Mhm.
best as I can. As far as the things that I love, I have a ton of shoe brands that I partner with that are on my website that are brands that I approve of, that have great shoes, ranging from cute little slip-ons from Splay that are super fun to sneakers to sandals. There's lots of options on there, kids sizing and adult sizing, and different price points. So please check out my website. If I have a discount code, please use it. I've got a lot of them. The other two groups that I work a lot with are the Foot Collective. The
Mm.
Soulmate is probably one of my favorite go-tos. It's an all-in-one foam roller, domes for balance and stability, mobility training, small roller. They've got toe spacers, lots of good stuff there. So this is probably one of my favorite things if you travel a lot for shows because it fits in a dance bag and it does a ton at once. The other thing that I really like is Gait Happens has an awesome little foot health kit. They've relaunched in the recently. Everything is latex free except the spiky ball. So if you do have latex allergies, which I know are common with hypermobility, just be warned.
Mhm.
This part, unfortunately, and it's soft, it's not as spiky as you think, but this is not latex free. But we've got a band, we've got toe strengtheners. I have an Instagram reel on these. This guy is no joke. Toe spacers. So it kind of comes with everything you need in a nice little bag that can go right in your dance bag and help you work on that foot strength. So
Mhm.
I think those are the two groups that I'm from a foot and ankle standpoint. Obviously, we all know Doctors for Dancers and iAtoms and some of the big stuff that's out there for dance. But from a foot health standpoint, please check out Gait Happens. Please check out the Foot Collective for some fun toys to use and training options. And check out my website for some shoes, please.
Yeah, wonderful. And we'll make sure that folks can find you easily from the different ways that we share the episode as well. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for your time today. It was great getting to chat with you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing.
Dance Med Spotlight is hosted and produced by Alyssa Arms. We discuss all things dance medicine. This has been another episode from Dance Med Spotlight. The Dance Med Spotlight is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present.